Councillor Grant, under the apologies, should that be when we do the roll call of who's present?
Yes, we can do. Are we live now? Sorry.
Looks like we are now.
Okay. At which point do you want to do that? Just after. So we'll do that at item 2. Do the roll call and the apologies at the same time.
Yes, that sounds okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're live, so we can probably start. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21st century and our Greenest Climate Emergency Advisory Committee meeting to date. I think the last time we met, holding virtual committee meetings was a bit of a pipe dream, but that was quite a long time ago, and a lot of things have changed since then. It's not the circumstances we want our first online meeting to be under, but if there is a silver lining to this pandemic, that's that we, as a society, we've shown that we're willing to make real change in an emergency. And I don't think we should underestimate the silver linings in a crisis. Good things can arise at such times of great change. I mean, after World War II, we created free healthcare for all. First votes for women followed World War I, and even after the Black Death in medieval times was followed up by the founding of the great British institution of the public house. So I think we've got a choice right now. We can either strive to return to our old way of life, or we can forge a new green future. And this committee exists to forge a new green future. And our officers have been working hard to keep our council services running and provide additional support to the vulnerable community this time. They've done this with carbon emissions from travel reduced to near zero thanks to everyone working from home and modern technology. So great things are possible. Having said that, when we're forging a new path, it's never quite plain sailing, and due to some technical limitations with the system that we're using, we're not actually able to receive presentations from external bodies, which means that unfortunately we can't have the public speaking directly to us. We have got a written statement so we can read that out, but it also unfortunately means that for item 6, the presentation by Ether that we were planning to have on determining the Vale of Whitehorse District carbon baseline, that item can't quite go ahead as planned. So what I suggest is that when we get to that item in the agenda, we discuss how we would like to receive that report instead, and whether we wait for the technical solution to come through, or we look at it in a different way. Unfortunately, it's the challenge of doing a live broadcast publicly, which it has to be live due to the regulations, but that unfortunately is stopping us from allowing external people to get into the system and present to us technically at the moment. Without further ado, I guess I don't need to tell anyone where their fire exits are this time. So I think we can probably go on to the apologies for absence. So can I hand over to Candida to do a roll call and let us know the apologies?
Hi, Candida speaking, Democratic Services Officer. Do we have Councillor Amos Devine?
I can get my mic work. Hello, yes you do.
Thank you. And Councillor Eric de la Harpe.
I am present.
Thank you. And Councillor Hayley Gascoigne.
Yeah, that's me.
Thank you. And Councillor Alison Jenner.
I'm here.
And Councillor Max Thompson.
Present, yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And we've had apologies from Councillor Eric Batts, and his substitute today is Councillor Nathan Boyd.
Yeah, present.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, the first agenda item then is to go through the minutes from last time. So do we have any comments on those? I will just wait a few seconds because I know sometimes it takes a bit of a lag to come through on the system, but it doesn't appear like we do. So
Well, as I remember the event, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jenner. In that case, we will sign off those minutes at a time when we can actually physically sign them, but it's good. So declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest, please?
Yeah, I've got a declaration of interest. Is mentioned in the report that's provided as part of the papers, that the Low Carbon Hub has provided a quotation for some solar panels, to let you know that I am an investor in the Low Carbon Hub.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? If you can use the chat just to flag up that you want to speak. Okay, in that case, moving on to urgent business. So there is no urgent business that I'm aware of, unless anyone has anything they need to say. Okay, so that takes us on to item 6 of the agenda, which is determining the Vale of Whitehorse district carbon baseline. So the this is the one that unfortunately we're not going to actually be able to receive the presentation as we would have liked to today, which is obviously very disappointing, but it's this is one of the first committee meetings to go ahead online, and so we are forging a new path, as you say, and there are obviously a few things that we would like to get ironed out in the future, and hopefully be able to receive it. But so we got a few options of what we could do here. So my understanding is we could either take this sort of offline, so it's not in a live broadcast as one of our task and finish group meetings, which would have the benefit that we could do it quite soon, but the downside that it wouldn't be immediately in the public arena. Or we could hold on until there might be a technical solution found. So anyway, I'll hand over to any comments from the members, please. Again, if you just flag in the chat that you'd like to speak. Okay, so Councillor Devine.
Right, yeah.
Hey Ross, are you there?
Am I unmuted now?
You're unmuted now.
Right, thanks. Yeah, I think that what we really want to do is to have this report in front of us sooner rather than later. So I would definitely favour the task and finish group with the written report submitted to the committee in time for our next formal meeting where we can actually discuss it.
Okay, Max.
Hi. Hello. Yes. So I'm going to get hang of this. So yeah, I was just wondering, do we have any idea from our officers of how long it might take to have that technological solution in place? Because if it's sort of a matter of a week, I would suggest that it would be better to have it in public rather than the task and finish group. But if it's a matter of a month, I would prefer the task and finish group. Is sort of where I am. So I wondered if our officers had any idea of how quickly we can get that technical solution in place.
So my understanding is it's not particularly imminent. It would, I think, involve a different solution, something like Zoom or something like that. But then that has sort of implications from sort of the basically making sure that we do everything within the regulations and things like that. Does one of the officers want to comment on that? Might have more information, or maybe I've said it. Don't know, Candida, do you want to speak? Or?
Does Michelle have any comment on that one?
Good evening. Yeah, I think my only comment on that would be just to echo the chair's comments already. To get a new solution in isn't something that we're going to be able to do in the next week or so, unfortunately, Councillor Thompson. And my suggestion is that we obviously asked Ether to do this piece of work for us in January, and it's now June, and you know, I know officers and Ether are really keen to kind of showcase the work that they've done. So I think, although, you know, it isn't time critical as such, I think because we've had the work and the report back from them for quite some time now, I think we're really keen to showcase it to committee members, and then in time at a future committee meeting, share the learnings and share the presentation with the public.
Okay, thank you. Hayley.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much specific extra to add, other than I agree with Michelle and Amos. I think it makes sense if this report has been prepared, we should take a look at it. I don't really see the downside of not doing it immediately in front of the public, because it will still be shared with the public at some point. So I would prefer that we look at it sooner rather than later in a task and finish group.
Okay, Alison.
I was just writing to say I agree with Amos and Hayley. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any more comments? No, okay, so it sounds like we're agreed that we want to take that forward in a task and finish group, and then allow the report to be publicly available following that. And we could also discuss it again at our next committee meeting, or at the end of August, and perhaps have someone present some of the feedback from that task and finish group at that meeting. Yeah, so I don't think we need to take a vote on that. Agreed. So, the next item is our work programme update and the impact of the COVID-19 response on the progress with that. So there is a report which is pages 10 to 22 in the agenda pack, and to give more information, Michelle, could I just ask you to give a very brief few words introduction?
Thank you. Yes, of course. Michelle Wells, Insight and Policy Manager. So bringing forward a report for your consideration this evening on a status update for the one-year climate emergency work programme. The Climate Emergency Advisory Committee that was scheduled for the 30th of March was cancelled due to the COVID-19 outbreak, and since that time a number of key council staff have taken up roles within the community hub, including key officers who were previously focused on the development of the climate emergency response. This kind of understandably has led to limited resource and capacity across the whole council to kind of further this area of work, and the report kind of coming before you tonight will show the projects that are paused because of that. You may also want to start to give some consideration as to whether any of the projects within the programme could be refocused, reprioritised or strengthened in light of COVID-19. And I'm proposing that for the next Climate Emergency Advisory Committee that we're looking to schedule for the end of July, we bring forward a report to the committee that summarises the national and Oxfordshire recovery planning in respect of recovery from COVID-19. This can be then reviewed by the committee in tandem with the emerging corporate plan principles that are also scheduled for Cabinet in July. It might just be helpful for you to review those two reports and then to review the work programme and kind of give some time to whether you want to refocus or strengthen any of the projects within the programme. But I would just like the opportunity to inform your thinking with a report that summarises the national and Oxfordshire position in July. Thank you.
Apologies, Councillor Grant. You're currently muted. If you'd just be able to unmute and repeat. Thank you.
Yes, sorry about that. I was just saying, unfortunately, for those who can't see the chat, Councillor Alison Jenner has asked that Michelle thank the entire team for their work on that they've been doing with the community, and I think that goes for all of us. I think we've been doing an exceptional job under very difficult circumstances, so we appreciate it, and I think the whole community really appreciates it too. Would anybody like to speak on this item, general points, and then we might go through sort of section by section? No, okay. Sorry, we do have someone who wants to speak. Sorry, Hayley. Sorry, I should say one thing is that the officers were very good and leading the way in every time they speak. They are actually saying who they are and what their role is. So it might be a good idea if we all do that as well for at least the first time we speak. Hayley.
Yep. So I'm Councillor Hayley Gascoigne. A few questions I had about it generally. So I do welcome the idea of going through it point by point. And I welcome Michelle's comment about like reviewing this in light of the new situation. And so the two things that come out to me, and they are mentioned in the report, is one about budget. So we know that this COVID response is going to cost the council quite a lot of money, and I was wondering how that affects our budget, or whether this is because it was already allocated, then we can go ahead and spend that money, was the first point. And then the second point was about improving active transport, and I think we've seen that a lot in the national news about more walking and more cycling, which is what people have been doing during this. So what do we think we can do as the council to sort of forward or further that agenda?
Just on the budget point, so my understanding is that basically any uncommitted discretionary spend could be challenged. It is possible for us to carry budget over into next year as well, but the caveat again on that is that any uncommitted spend could be challenged. So if we do want to make changes, there is possibility for changes, I think, in the future. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that. Amos.
Yes, Councillor Devine. So just in addition to what Councillor Gascoigne was saying about active transport, I know that a lot of that isn't necessarily within our remit, but we should be encouraging the relevant bodies, for example, the county council, in that regard. And the other thing we should also be trying to do is whatever we can to encourage people to work from home as a rule of thumb, rather than as a only when necessary.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any more sort of general points? So Alison Jenner agrees with Amos. Just not everyone will be able to see the chat necessarily who's watching at home, so it's a good idea if you do want to verbalise your agreement, just to quickly say it. Eric.
Councillor Eric de la Harpe. Just on the work programme, it would be helpful if the items that have changed could be highlighted.
Yes, so I think we should get a sort of a more detailed change in the next committee meeting. I think we should be able to have a sort of more detailed report, so perhaps the officers could take that on board and just highlight anything that is changed.
Yeah, just highlight the changes that we should be alerted to.
Just to come back to you on that point, Councillor De La Harpe, the main changes for your consideration this evening are the projects that are paused, and they're clearly marked up as paused within the table.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so I think if we go to page 12 of the public reports pack, the agenda pack, that takes us to the start of the work programme review. So the first thing there is the items postponed from the March Climate Emergency Committee, which is defining the scope of carbon emissions across the district, which is the report that we're waiting to receive from ETHA. So I think we've already discussed that. And then the items 2 to 4 are the completed reports that we've had so far. So does anyone want to comment on those? Yes, Alison. You may not be unmuted, Alison.
Yes, Alison Jenner. I'm interested in the work that's going on in Farringdon Leisure Centre, taking the opportunity to make more environmentally friendly the boilers that are needing repair. Can you tell me any detail about that? Thank you.
Michelle, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, if I could refer to one of my officers, Heather Saunders, are you able to give Councillor Jenner a little bit more information about that project, please?
Good evening. Yes, Heather Saunders, Corporate Energy Officer. So we have carried out a piece of work looking at the theoretical possibilities for this site in terms of more standard and renewable energy options, and a wide range of options have been considered, and the report that we have at the moment that the leisure team is reviewing looks at all the costs and carbon benefits of all the different options. As you can imagine, the best case renewable energy options have a higher upfront budget than the business as usual gas boilers, and at the moment the leisure team are considering the potential for taking these forward. If they brought this to councillors, you would obviously have to consider whether you think the additional budget is appropriate in this case.
Thanks, Heather.
Okay, and is that something that we might get the opportunity to discuss, or is the maybe in the task and finish group the timeline might not be right for a full committee meeting? So,
Michelle, are you able to assist here in terms of the discussions you might have had with the leisure team?
Yeah, I'm not sure the timelines will line up with the next Climate Emergency Advisory Committee. I think that's a discussion between the Cabinet member for the leisure team and yourself, Councillor Grant.
okay, thank you. Do we have any more comments on that section? Okay, so if we move down to new projects, which is item 5, down to item 8. Would anybody like to speak on those? So that's Oxfordshire tree mapping project, identify opportunities to invest in solar energy off-site, Oxfordshire Green Tech, and the general public information on the climate emergency. Okay, yes, Max, please.
Hi there. Yeah, I've got a question on the Oxfordshire tree mapping project. So I realise in status it's in progress, but timescale may be impacted by COVID-19 response. So I note that the project was due to commence in June 2020, which of course is where we are now. And I just wondered if we had any clarity about when the decision about whether to delay this or when we would know how much this was going to be impacted by the COVID-19 response would be made. So I guess when will we have more information about the timescale there?
So I think we may have the opportunity to get someone to actually one of the officers in this area to come and speak to us in one of the upcoming meetings. But Michelle, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will. Yes, on this project, we do have the opportunity for one of the specialist planning officers to come along to perhaps the Task and Finish group to talk to us about this project, so we can be briefed more fully on the scope. It is a project that's led by an external management company and the county council, I believe. So timescales are not something that's completely within our grasp, but it is something that within a Task and Finish group we should be able to understand the brief more fully.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Yeah, I think this is the one topic that I don't know about the other members of the committee, but I think it's one that I probably received the most public comments about, in particular people saying, well, can I just plant some trees here? And you want to be able to, of course, say, well, of course you can, but it's not always quite so simple. There's planting trees on the wrong land can have the sort of detrimental environmental effects sometimes. So we do need to make sure that what we're doing is done properly and rigorously and sustainably for the future. But I think it would be, I think it would be a good idea if we can take up the officers' offer to come along and speak to us at one of our Task and Finish groups or a future committee meeting. Anybody else would like to speak? Hayley.
Yes, so I note that Michelle wants us to review some of these, in particular the ones that are paused, and if we continue them. Is that correct? So in this section then we have the one called Oxfordshire Green Tech, which is paused, and the original timeline was April-May, which is obviously passed. So should we discuss whether we still want to do this, or is that the point of this section?
Yes, I think that's definitely yes. Whether we want to do it and how, I guess, what are the priorities for things that we may want to look at of the pause projects in the future. So, does anyone have anything they'd like to comment on Oxfordshire Green Tech?
I mean, could Michelle perhaps give a bit more information about it, just so we're all up to speed?
Yes, Michelle.
Hi. Yes, I can do. So just want to clarify the reason that project is paused is because the project was going to need to be led by the economic development team, and they are kind of fully committed at the moment with COVID-19 business support activities. So whilst of course the committee may wish to consider whether the Green Tech membership is something they still wish to explore, by the nature of it being paused, that isn't the officer's suggestion that you should review it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's just therefore that there isn't capacity for us to progress it at the moment in the original timetable that we had laid out, but it is something that we can progress at a later stage should the committee still want us to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this item and all the items personally, I think we definitely want to continue with. We haven't got anything on this list that is superfluous. I think it's all, if we want to get to carbon zero, we need to tackle it from every single direction.
And if I may, Chair, I think the Task and Finish group did spend quite a considerable amount of time in December prioritising these actions, didn't they? So I think these are a really comprehensive, well thought through list of actions that you want to take forward.
Yes, quite. And the other thing, for those people who may not be aware, a lot of the burden of the community response has fallen onto councils, and our district council is certainly no exception to that. Our office has been doing a great job ensuring that vulnerable people get the help that they need and the support that they need in the community, making sure they're in touch with groups who can get them food packages and things like that. And I believe that at one point it was taking up about 2/3 of our officers had to be moved across to helping with that response, and there's still a very significant number of officers working on that, which is why some of these items have had to be paused for the time being. But it's not that we don't want to continue. Any other comments on this section? Hayley.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks Michelle for that clarification. And then in that case, I guess the only way that we should reconsider whether to progress something is not whether it's marked as paused, but whether the situation that we find ourselves in now changes. It changes the environment in a way which the action that is here doesn't make sense anymore. And for the green tech one, I don't think that's the case. I do think we should carry on with it. So yes, I'll have that in my mind as we go through.
Yes, and I guess that there is a possibility that there may be things that we wanted to add to it, the work plan, as well as a result of the changed circumstances that we're in. So perhaps we'll come back to the opportunity to add things when we get to the end of the list. Alison Jenner.
Yeah, I was just asking about item 6. Obviously, a lot of the work has had to be interrupted because of the situation, but it says that item 6, investing in solar energy, is in progress. So I'm just wondering how far you've been able to get with that, or I'm quite happy to find that there's not a lot been able to be done because of the situation.
Michelle?
Yeah, I'll refer to my officer Heather Saunders because she has been able to progress that, although I fear I may be the blockage there. Over to you, Heather.
Heather, are you muted still, perhaps? We can't hear you, Heather.
Great. Sorry, there was a slight technical problem. Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Okay. So whilst several colleagues have been assigned to other work, we still have had a limited resource continuing on the climate emergency, which is good news. And because this project will be delivered by an external organisation, or at least led largely by an external organisation, this is one that can go ahead. So we've been busy trying to prepare the specification for it, and we have received a quote that we are happy with, subject to senior management approval. So the only final hurdle is obviously that our senior management are extremely stretched, and we're just in the queue, if you like, hoping that it will find favour with the senior management, and then we will be to sign it off. So it's in progress in the sense that when we have the sign off, we will be to continue straight away with this work, which is great news.
That's really good news. Thank you very much for doing the work on it.
Any more comments on this particular section? Okay, so if we move on, then there's ongoing projects, which is section 9 onwards. So this covers grounds maintenance and public toilet cleaning services, the Cromarsh offices, Oxfordshire electric vehicle infrastructure, strategy, park and charge, that's electric charging rather than car parking fees, planning design guide. And all of those are down as ongoing in progress. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask about any of those? Okay. Okay, I have a question and it's from Hayley.
Yeah, so one of the ongoing projects that's listed here is the Cromarsh offices. This one stands out to me as being one of the ones that things might change because of COVID-19. Could we have more of an update, I mean, in terms of where we are with that? Because obviously it's been delayed, although that's not written here, but the actual project itself has been delayed, and also it may be reviewed. So does somebody have an update on that one?
Yeah, so my understanding is that it is delayed, or there have been some delays, so it's not actually delayed. It is on track, as there is contingency built into the work programme. And obviously that the senior management team are reviewing the implications of COVID-19 and whether that changes any future requirements. But I don't think we haven't had any other update as far as I'm aware. If anyone wants to add anything to that, please let me know now. Otherwise, no. Is that okay, Hayley?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Any other comments on this section? Okay. Hayley.
So I think some of the pieces in this section of the report are actually really important, and some of the ones that I think will make a really big difference. So the planning design guide, I just want to understand a bit more about that, where we are with it and what the implication is, so its timeline, and then what impact that will have on planning decisions that we make. So obviously anything that's being built today can't be affected by it, so depending on its timeline, what timeline are we looking at for which developments in the future would be affected?
Yeah, just before I hand over to someone else, I'd just like to add that I think this is perhaps the most important thing in the entire work plan as well. The thing that we have, well, basically, I think the council's own emissions is something like 0.6% of all the emissions in the district, from what we've heard before, whereas emissions from homes are one of the largest groups of emissions going, and this is a significant proportion. So yeah, I agree. I just want to agree with you on that. Michelle, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Michelle Wells, Insight and Policy Manager. Yeah, as outlined in the report, the project's being led by the specialist planning team, so I'm not going to stray too much into the technical aspects of the project. We are looking at the project lasting around 18 months, with the design guide coming into force in September 2021. As you'll note from the report, it is suggested that we hold a task and finish group meeting with the specialist planning officers that are bringing the design guide together, because I think there's a really important role for the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee in advising those specialist planning officers which principles you want to see within the design guide in respect of climate change. So what principles do you want to put in that guide for you know, house builders to look to be following? So that's something that we can progress quite quickly because the project is ongoing. From what I'm hearing so far, this is one of your top priorities. So if you would like a task and finish group with the specialist planning officers, I can take that forward quite quickly as an action and get that set up. They'll be able to brief you more fully on the technical aspects of the project and what the design guide will allow you to do.
Would anybody like to comment on the design guide?
Yeah.
Was that Alison?
Yeah. I'd like to say something. Yes, Alison Jenner. As far as I understand it, the design guide only applies to building projects planning houses of 10 or over. And of course, a lot of the work that's going on is going to be alterations and amendations to current housing stock. Is there any way that we can encourage, I'll use no stronger word, people planning improvements to incorporate best practice in environmental protection into their plans? Can we include that in the design guide for all projects?
So I think that's what the design guide will do. As I've said, I can't kind of add any technical information from a planning policy standpoint, but from my understanding of the project, that is what the design guide is set up to do. I think what would be best is if we take forward a task and finish group with the relevant planning officers. I know that in preparation for the design guide, they have also pulled together which planning policies we also have in place at the moment around climate change. So that would be a useful document to circulate to the committee in advance of that task and finish group meeting. So you had a full list of the actual planning policies in respect of climate change that are in place at the moment. Because obviously they're important levers to include within the design guide as well.
That would be very helpful. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay.
Any other comments on the design guide? So I think there's probably a good consensus there that we would like to have a task and finish group on the design guide in the near future. I guess the only question would be whether we want to look at it in a different way other than the task and finish group. Perhaps we just would like to just go through quickly and just agree whether we are happy to go with the suggestion of a task and finish group to go through the design group guide. Perhaps we could just quickly call on the different members and just get their agreement to that.
Yes, I'm happy to be part of a task and finish group. Thank you.
Okay, we'll do it a roll call. I think.
Councillor Grant, would you like me to call out names?
Yes, please, can leader.
Okay. Okay, so Councillor Grant.
Yes, I would.
Councillor Devine.
I agree. It is a task and finish group would be an excellent idea.
Councillor De La Harpe.
I agree.
And Councillor Gascoigne.
Yes.
Councillor Jenner.
Yes, you have my approval.
And Councillor Thompson.
Yes, I think it's a good idea.
And Councillor Boyd.
Yeah, fully agree. It's a great idea.
Thank you, everybody. Any other comments on any of the points in that section other than the design guide? Okay, we can then move down to the communications and engagement part, which there's only one item under that, which is currently paused, which is the engagement with residents, parish councils and community groups, support town councils in delivering climate emergency plans and projects. Perhaps self-explanatory, but any comments? And then the next one is consultations. That's the Oxfordshire Pension Fund consultation on investment strategy statement. So there has been an Oxfordshire Pension Fund consultation group. One representative from this council went along to those meetings and is one of our subs for this committee. And I believe we've sent a response already to that. Then if we go down to the further work section, so we've got recruit climate change lead. There's quite a few on this one, so perhaps I'll just ask if anyone wants to ask any questions about the climate change lead first. Haley.
Yeah, so I just wanted an update on this one. I had it in my list anyway. Was wondering if recruitment is ongoing in this period. I just know that many of the companies, and I know this is a bit different, are not recruiting people during this time due to budget and things. But is this one of those things where because we've already allocated the budget, we can just go ahead?
Michelle?
Thank you, Michelle Wells, Insight and Policy Manager. Yeah, so in answer to that, the climate change lead position was included in the allocation of budget from full council in February. I do need to put a paper through our senior management team for the request to recruit to the climate change lead position. And as advised at the start of this meeting, any discretionary spend may be challenged as part of that process. So it would be only prudent of me to, in the paper that I put forward to the senior management team, to outline the business case as to why that climate change lead is required, as I did when I was originally putting the budget papers together anyway. So I will be taking it through that process. I have also been informed that I'll need to do a job evaluation of the position because it's a newly created position, just to ensure that it fits within the relevant grade boundaries for the councils. All of that work does take a little bit of time, and my efforts have been focused on the COVID-19 response until very recently. So it is something that I've picked up in the last couple of weeks or so, but it is something that I am looking to progress.
Thank you.
Okay, so following down the list, we've then got quite a few paused items in this section. So there's the internal launch of the work programme. Obviously, there aren't actually many people in the office at the moment. There is energy efficient lighting at the Beacon, community climate initiatives grant, taxi idling, council reports. So that's to do with the decision-making templates, biodiversity themed projects, community action groups, Vale Vision, project policy and strategy review conference, and I'll stop there because that was rather a lot of things to go through. So just seeing who's asking to speak. As you said before, the pause because of just the resource issues at the moment, but not saying that we don't want to continue them. Amos, you would like to speak?
Yes, Councillor Devine again. I was just looking at item 18, the electric pool vehicles, and the thought struck me that if many more officers are going to be working from home, how efficient would it be to have a central pool of electric vehicles if people are going to have to travel from their home to use the electric vehicles? It's just something that I think we probably ought to keep an eye on.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's a good point, and it's not. I can't work out whether that's going to mean that people want to use the pools more, because if they need their own car less, they might not have their own car and therefore want to use a pool car more, or vice versa. So I think you're right. That's something to keep under review. Any other comments on that? Hayley.
Yeah, well, I guess that if you even put the electric part of it aside, it's a question anyway, isn't it? So I don't know if it will be with us to make that decision, because maybe it will just come from another part of the council to decide whether pool vehicles in general make sense, whether you have less of them. I imagine they'll still be needed, and then in which case we may as well have them electric. But yeah, it is something to think about. But I guess it's kind of one of those wait a little bit longer things, because anyway it's not due to be yeah, I don't know the time scale of it, delivery March 2021, so there might need to be we might need to see how the situation settles out in general.
Any other comments on that, or any of the other parts of that section, the items that I read out? Sorry, Hayley, you got in first, but I'm going to let Max speak because you keep asking questions, which is good, but we'll come back to you in a second. Max.
Sorry, mine's a kind of, I think, quite a simple technical question. What's the difference between paused and scheduled to start in Q1? Because I assumed Q1 would be January to March, but I might be mistaken. So if one of the officers could clarify for me, when exactly is Q1, Q2, Q3 and Q4?
I had this exact same question. Michelle, would you like to clarify? Oh, don't think we can hear you, Michelle.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, the difference, Councillor Thompson, is so before we were reprioritised it and refocused onto COVID-19 efforts. The officers involved in developing the 1-year work programme did spend some time reviewing and scheduling when we would like some of these projects to start, looking at the work programme in its entirety. So where we have a future scheduled date, that's because in our internal planning session we kind of scheduled that's when the project was to start. So if the date is in the future, we haven't marked it as a paused project. Q1 for us runs 4 financial years.
Okay, Hayley, you are next. Hayley, are you muted?
Yes, here I am. Sorry, yes, so my question was around the efficient lighting at the beacon, and the reason for it being paused is because the building is closed, but and correct me if I'm wrong, we hope to reopen the building at a point in the future, and in that way, does it make sense to do this work whilst the building is closed?
Michelle?
Yeah, if I could ask my officer Heather Saunders to respond to that one.
Thank you very much. Heather Saunders, Corporate Energy Officer. Yes, you're absolutely right. And just this week we have begun discussions. So we have been emailing the contractor and officers at the site and waiting for advice from officers on the site as to when it would be safe for the contractor to attend. But we certainly agree we would want to do that as soon as possible, and it does not need to wait until the beacon opens, just needs to be within our procedures and safe to proceed. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so the next, well, I skipped over a couple of those that weren't paused, but I think one of those was the electric vehicle one, which we did discuss, and then the other one was the low carbon council estate work package, including energy saving opportunities and renewable energy in council buildings, and the invitation to quote project specification is being drafted to initiate that project. Okay, and then I think we're on the last page of these. So we've got officer training, the cozy. So all of these ones are, let's just say the ones I'm about to read out are not paused. They are all scheduled for different times this year. So we've got scheduled Q2 officer training, the cozy homes, and then for Q3 single-use plastic, town-based energy data, district-wide emissions model, and electric vehicle hire facility. Do we have any questions there? No, okay. In that case, I think we can probably just quickly check if anyone had anything that's not on that list and that you think should be on that list. Now is as a result of the, obviously we reviewed these all in detail previously, but if there's new circumstances to do with the COVID-19, give us pause for thought of something else that should be on that list, then please speak now. Okay. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I said it at the start of the meeting. It's about cycling and walking and being able to support those. However, yeah. I'm not sure exactly what I'm proposing because, as Amos said, it's quite difficult. For some of those things, we're not necessarily the authority that's responsible for those things. But yeah, that's my comment.
Can we come back to that one in just a minute, because we've got a public statement that's been given to us by a group in Abingdon, and it's related to that topic. So I think we'll read that out in a minute, and then we'll discuss that one again in more detail once we have this sort of public comment.
Yeah. Okay.
Eric.
Councillor Eric Earlharp. Yeah, I was just on the work programme. It occurs to me that we're looking at locations for solar energy, and we're also looking at electric charging in car parks. I just want to make sure that the idea of putting solar panels over car parks will be considered.
Okay, over car parks, like a sort of canopy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so we have all the space, which is a car park. I don't know how feasible it would be, but it would be nice to know that it would be looked into, that the car park is covered in solar panels, which are then generate electricity for cars to be charged. Okay. I would just like to know that that concept will be looked into in the investigations.
Okay, can I ask Michelle, could you comment on whether it's something we've looked at all, or is it in the pipeline? I can't hear you. If not, maybe Heather would like to comment if we can't hear Michelle.
Yes, I will ask Heather to comment. Thank you, Chair.
Hello, Heather Saunders, Corporate Energy Officer. So as regard the council's car parks, I unfortunately am not aware that that's something that our technical services team have considered as yet, although it certainly could be. In terms of the Cromarsh offices, it's certainly a solution that would be discussed by the design team, whether the timing of that may not coincide with the initial opening of the site. It may be something that is planned in for the future with the appropriate cabling, but not necessarily delivered all at once. It might be something that could be phased in the future, depending on resources.
Thank you, Heather.
Could I just ask members of the committee, rather than writing comments in the chat, if you want to say something, please just put in the chat that you want to speak, and then I will call on you. Just because I don't think I'm not sure that all of the people watching this can see the chat, and those things might get lost. So I don't know. Did Councillor Alison Jenner or Amos Devine want to speak on this topic?
Thanks, David. I was just commenting that it's a good idea. It would be excellent use of space. They have these in northern France, and they perform two functions: collecting solar rays and also protecting the vehicles and keeping them a tiny bit cooler. Thank you.
Okay, and Amos, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I wrote it was just because it was such a small comment. It didn't feel like worthy the interruption. But I did just want to say that, you know, as a driver, some shade in a car park would be very welcome, because sometimes, well, as Alison said, it, you know, that little bit cooler, or maybe when it's raining, you know, having a bit of shade when you're trying to load the car and things is much appreciated.
Yeah, I just add my own comment. I think it would very much depend on the particular circumstances for a particular car park. I know the ones that we have in Farringdon are sort of in a historical market town centre, and perhaps adding a sort of a roof to a car park in those kind of situations might not be quite in keeping. But there might be other car parks where it is. I
mean, I was thinking of the Beacon in Wantage, which I think would be fair enough there.
If I may just interject, I just want to remind committee members that the projects that are included within the work programme are projects that Cabinet and Council have agreed to take forward as part of the one-year work programme. So obviously it's great to kind of have discussion about other things to include, but what's included in the work programme has kind of been ratified and approved by Cabinet and Council. So just to remind you of that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so unless there's anything else burning on that one, I think we can perhaps move on to the public participation, as there probably are, although we can't hear from them, unfortunately. Maybe at a future meeting we'll be able to sort that out, but I'm sure there are members of the public who are watching this eagerly and waiting for us to get to this section. So what I'll do, we've only got one submission from the public in this instance, so it should be circulated to all members, but I will quickly read it out, as I don't think it's necessarily available on the website, but it's from Extinction Rebellion Abingdon, and they say, dear councillors, we have all enjoyed the quieter streets in Abingdon during the coronavirus lockdown, and have also noticed the increase in traffic over recent weeks. As you're aware, on 9th of May, the government announced that it is making funds available to create and improve infrastructure for cycling. We want to know what the plans are in Abingdon to improve the safety of cycling in response to this announcement. In particular, we would like feedback on what the plans are for pop-up bike lanes with protected space for cycling, wider pavements, safer junctions, and cycle and bus only corridors as part of the £250 million Emergency Active Travel Fund, which the government has made available across England. We have some suggestions on routes in Abingdon which we feel are currently unsafe and where the safety for cyclists could be improved through pop-up cycle lanes. These are Oxford Road, Wotton Road, Spring Road, Ox Street and Drayton Road. We also suggest that the Oxford Road through Bagleywood could be closed to traffic, so through traffic, to create a direct and safer route for cycle commuters to travel and to work. Some other suggestions we have could be immediately implemented, including an end-free car parking and creating more cycle parking in Abingdon Town Centre. Longer term measures which should be considered to improve safety for cyclists, including widening current cycle paths, giving cyclists priority at junctions, closing off roads such as used as wrap runs for through traffic where there are alternatives, and introducing 20-mile-an-hour speed limits on residential roads. We appreciate that road infrastructure decisions are made by the county council. If they are the ones who will be administering the government funding, then we would like to see the District Council's Climate Emergency Advisory Committee putting pressure on them to begin urgently using this money to create local safe cycle spaces. So just to sort of answer that final point before I hand over to the General Committee. So yes, road infrastructure decisions are made by the county councils, and my understanding is that they will be the ones who will be administering the government funding for this. Who would like to speak? So if we don't have anyone else, I'd just like to say, I think making more space for cycling, and this is an Abingdon comment, this is the whole of the Vale, the whole country in fact, but as we're talking in the Vale, the whole of the Vale, I think making extra space for cycling at this time is obviously critical. We don't want people who are afraid to go on public transport suddenly all getting in their cars. That would cause gridlock and huge upturn in emissions. One of the only benefits so far to this whole thing has been the reduction of emissions and cleaner air, and I'd like to see that continue beyond this pandemic, and that things that we implement now could be done in the future. So Eric, you would like to speak.
Eric de la Harpe. I'm also the Vale Whitehorse cycling champion, and I would like to echo the sentiments of the public submission and welcome their suggestions. And it would be great to see similar suggestions coming from the other parishes within the Vale. I would like to propose a motion that we support the traffic restriction measures that OCC are looking into to enable social distancing, and we support the idea that those measures become permanent.
Okay, thank you, Eric. So we'll carry on with the discussions, and then would anyone like to discuss that? Well, essentially, would anyone like to discuss that motion? Amos, you were already asking to say something. Please go ahead. So you may be muted. Amos.
Sorry, technical issues.
Yep.
Hello, sorry. Can you hear me now?
We can now.
Right, yes. So I think clearly whatever action we take will have to be in the form of a letter. And I'm wondering whether that letter would be more powerful coming from the district council as a whole rather than from this committee. But it's also weighing up the balance of whether we can do something faster as this committee rather than waiting for full council. So I don't really know where the balance of feeling lies. It was just, I think, what the options are at the moment.
Okay. Would anybody like to comment? So, I mean, my comment on that part there would just be, I think you're correct in your sort of weighing up of the situation. And my concern would be we don't actually have a date for our next full council meeting. So if we do want to do something faster than that, then we don't quite know when that would be. Would anyone else like to comment? Yes, Haley.
Yeah, I mean, considering what you just said, I mean, originally I was thinking it made sense for the full council to do it, but since, as you say, we don't know when that meeting will be, I don't really see the harm in us or rather you, Councillor David Grant, as the chair of the committee, writing something, because time is of the essence here, right? We've already seen that lockdown measures are being lifted every few weeks. It seems that something else is happening to change the situation, and so if we want to take advantage of the lockdown and the situation we find ourselves in, perhaps it's better to act sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Amos? I think you may still be muted, Amos. Can we hear you? I can't hear anything. Okay, while Amos is sorting out his technical issue there, I just say the only thing with the motion that you proposed, Derek, it says, I think, supporting what the Oxfordshire County Council are doing. The only thing I would say about that wording is I'm not quite sure what they are doing yet. So I hope we are supportive of it, but until perhaps I just need sort of a clever bit of wording there, or something like supportive of them taking action, unless there is a blueprint out there for what they're planning to do, and I just haven't seen it.
What we know is that they have called it for some ideas, and they've asked every county councillor to submit ideas, and those have been submitted. That's as much as I know.
Okay, thank you. Amos,
yes. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Amos. Go ahead.
Right, yes, no, I was just realising that I pose a false dichotomy because it's not an either-or situation. What we could do is actually send a letter as a council or from you as chair, as a committee, and from you as chair, and we can always back that up with something from the full council at a later date whenever we do meet.
Okay. So do we have any other comments?
Yes.
Yes, Alison.
Yes, I agree with what's been said, and I think it would be really helpful for the committee chair to write a letter to the leader and ask her to take on board the support for more active transport, separate cycling paths all across the district. For instance, there's the proposed cycle path that would have gone from Ensham to Botley along the B4044, which was peremptorily cancelled last year. And if there's any work available to be done, then that would be an absolutely superb opportunity to get this fixed.
Okay, thank you. So any other comments? So Councillor Della Harp, having heard all that, did you want to propose the motion as you had it worded, or did you want to change it? We've had a few comments there about potentially doing it in the form of writing a letter. So I guess we could add that into the motion if that's how you wanted to do it.
Yes. So would we say we will write a letter to the leader of the council to express our support for the traffic restriction measures that Oxfordshire County Council are looking into to enable social distancing, and we support the idea that those measures become permanent. Okay,
that sounds reasonable to me. I'll just double check with our Democratic Services officers here. Candida, is that a sort of acceptable motion for this committee from a technical viewpoint?
Yeah, I think so. Does anyone else have any comment from Democratic Services?
Okay.
No, okay.
In that case, oh, sorry, Amos has just got in there just in time with an amendment. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to add in that maybe we could put this to our own full council as well for some added support. I'm not sure how to word that. Maybe someone can guide me.
Perhaps typically we make our recommendations to cabinet as a committee, as sort of our thing. I'm not quite sure how we would go about recommending to full council on that. If you've got a sort of proposed wording of what you were thinking of.
Maybe we could support this in the strongest possible terms and call on the cabinet to take whatever action is open to them to further the expansion of cycling, separate cycling paths, and support for walking and cycling.
Okay, so I guess they're almost two separate things. So we could do them as one motion. So Eric, do you want to add that into yours, that we also call on the cabinet to support the motion, to support this, or do you want to do that as a separate motion?
I like the wording that Councillor Jenner had.
Okay.
And could I just ask Councillor Jenner if was she referring to the letter from Extinction Rebellion to say we? Could you repeat what you said?
I don't know whether I can remember what I said. But I think we call on our council to support on this in the strongest possible terms and give whatever support is open to us as a council to promote and encourage Oxfordshire County Council to undertake separation of bicycle and foot lanes from the traffic to make them safer and to do it with all due speed. How's that?
Just say you said we'll call on the council. Would you before you said we'll call on the cabinet?
Yeah, cabinet, council. Yeah, first the one, then the other.
Okay, so just to try and clarify before we go to a vote on this, just exactly what we are doing. So there are two parts to the same motion. One is that we are calling on the Climate Committee to write a letter to Oxfordshire County Council in support of this.
If we can.
And also call on our cabinet to do what they can to support this. Is that right, Eric? Would you like to phrase it as you now see it is, so we can before we vote on it?
Yeah, just give me a minute to write it down.
So I'm sure our democratic officers are taking notes of exactly the wording we'll use.
Maybe Candida has that already on her writing pad.
Candida, have you got
any further clarification is always welcome. If we come up with the ideas and then have a solid sentence for the minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, when you're comfortable with what you've got, Eric, let us know.
Yeah.
And I think I'd just like to thank Extinction Rebellion Abingdon for their comments. It's obviously, I think, been well received and definitely worthwhile talking about and discussing.
Right, this is what I have. We call on this committee to write a letter to Oxfordshire County Council in support of the active travel / social distancing measures. And we also call on this committee to write to Council and Cabinet to call for their strongest support of these measures.
Okay, can we take a vote then, please? So Candida, can you do a roll call?
Yeah, sure.
Do we need a second?
Oh, sorry, we do. Sorry, do we have a
Alison
second?
Jenner.
Yep.
Councillor Alison Jenner is our seconder. Sorry, now can we have a roll call, please? Thank you,
Of
Kennedy.
course. So Councillor David Grant.
4.
And Councillor Amos Devine.
4.
You've got Councillor Eric de la Harpe.
4.
Councillor Hayley Gascoigne.
4.
And Councillor Alison Jenner, who seconded.
4.
The 4. And then Councillor Max Thompson. 4. We can't hear him, but he mouthed 4. Okay, so and then Councillor Nathan Boyd.
4.
Okay. So that's 7 votes in favour.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
So that concludes the agenda items for today. Thank you very much. I think it's been a reasonable success, this our online meetings, with the exception of in future we'd obviously like to be able to get direct public participation in letting them read out their own statements and having external presentations, obviously. Sorry, Hayley, did you have a comment there?
I was just wondering if there's any other business item or no.
We don't actually have any other business item on the agenda, but yes, any other business.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can. Okay. Okay. So perhaps I should have mentioned this in when we agreed the minutes, because in the last meeting, one of the rather large items we discussed was about car parking charges, and I was just wondering if we could have an update on that. It might be something we can carry forward to another meeting, but I just wanted to raise it as wanting to know timescales of that, because we did spend quite a long time discussing it at that meeting, and I'm not sure when it would be implemented.
Yes. So, well, in terms of when it will be implemented, I think, of course, we've made recommendations, but we don't actually know what the final decision will be. It was intended that would be looked again at later this year, at which point the Climate Committee's comments would be taken into account at that point. Obviously, parking fees were actually suspended entirely for the last couple of months now during the pandemic. My understanding is they're going to be reintroduced again in the coming weeks, but I don't know whether there is a change in the timetable for discussing parking charges as a whole this year. But my understanding was that they were before this this lockdown. Then it was going to be discussed around the autumn. But I just quickly check if any of the officers know anything more than that than me. Michelle?
Nothing to add to that, Chair. I think that's a really good summary of where we are with that.
Okay, and anything else from anyone? Max? Are you on mute, Max? We can't hear you, unfortunately. No, I don't think we can hear you, Max, which is unfortunate because I was going to say how great I think online meetings can be. And we've lost someone right at the death. Yeah,
Can
so
I
actually,
say, David, I agree with you. I think this has been a really good initiation into this process, especially for a committee like this, where we should be making more use of this technology. So thank you very much for your chairing, and to the staff of Democratic Services for keeping us on point, and hope we can do this more often, whether or not there's a COVID emergency going on in future. Thank you.
yes, thank you.
Hear, hear.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was going to say the same thing actually, and perhaps that's something we could talk about in a future committee meeting. Perhaps we want something to talk about now that we've had our first run at it. Perhaps we could have talk about that on an agenda in an upcoming, maybe even the next climate committee. Talk about whether this is some sort of format we would like to take forward. Obviously, that would be dependent on government regulations and how we're allowed to do things. They rushed in through legislation to allow us to do online meetings, so it might be worth. I think that could be worth adding to next agenda. Does anyone agree with that or have anything to say? Councillor Max Thompson is saying yes on. Oh, here we go. So we got some agreements on the chat there from a few people. Yeah,
I can put that on the list for the agenda and also put AOB back on as well.
Okay, so I think that does bring us to the end of the meeting. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you to those who are at home watching. I hope you've found it useful, and thank you to all our officers for setting this up. And I'm sure we're learning more every time we do this. So I think we'll only get better at it as time goes by. But I think that's been a very smooth first meeting. So thank you to all our officers for setting that up. I will now bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.